Welcome to Breaking Silence, a space for real conversations, education, and advocacy.
We're your hosts, Tiffany and Taylor, and we work at the Haven Domestic Violence Shelter and Sexual Assault Center in Valdosta, Georgia.
Every day, the Haven supports survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and child abuse. And this podcast is an extension of that mission.
Here, we talk openly about issues that impact our community, break down myths, share facts, and highlight resources that save lives.
So these conversations may be a little heavy, but they're necessary. Our goal is awareness, prevention, and healing.
If you or someone you know needs help, support is available, and you are not alone.
This is Breaking Silence. Let's talk.
Welcome back to Breaking Silence. Last episode, we talked about the history of sexual assault, how we got to where we are today, the history of evidence collection, how that's evolved over time, how victims have historically been treated up until today. So this episode is about the present, what we see, what maybe some victims are experiencing, and we're just going to have a conversation. We have Robyn here with us today.
Hello.
You ready to get into it?
Sure, let's go.
So last episode we did a myth and a fact at the very end, and a lot of people like that. So we're going to kind of do a similar style with this episode to talk about a myth and then dispel that myth and really break it down. So myth number 1, most sexual assaults are committed by strangers. One of the biggest things that we see is the misconception of what we're taught, what we've learned, and associating that with information today. So we were taught stranger dangers in school. We associate that we're going to be assaulted by that stranger, by a random person. You know, we're walking to our cars in the dark. We're walking in a back alley, or a white van's going to jump out. Somebody's going to snatch you up.
They're going to offer you candy to get in their van.
Right, to give you some candy and get in their van.
Help me find my dog.
And I think that's where one of those myths came from, is that association that strangers are dangerous. But that's not what we see.
It's there, but it's not as common as when you hear someone has been assaulted. It's not, oh, it was a stranger who scooped somebody up.
Right.
Or something along that. It might still be wise to stay in pairs and not go to your car that's parked in a dark alley alone. Have somebody, but
know your surroundings.
Know your surroundings and everything of that. But the majority of what we see they usually know the person who's done this to them.
The darkness to light curriculum that we used to teach talks about most of the abusers, sexual abuse is 10%, is 90% people that you know,
right.
Relatives, friends of your relatives, close friends to the family, people that are in your life often, and then that 10% would be the distance, acquaintance, and strangers.
Right. So, it's different between adults and children. Adults, it could be the friend who came back with your roommate who, might not really know you, but, your roommate brought them back to the apartment or dorm.
Yeah, or the guy that you met on Tinder, whatever dating app, and maybe this is your first or second date.
Right. But in children, a lot of times it's definitely a lot more of family. People who've been in your house before, close friends of the family, things of that nature.
Let me get my question. What makes that harder? Why does that make that harder on reporting?
Oh, well, because, let's talk about adults or adolescents and adults. They don't want to get somebody in trouble, especially if it's somebody they know.
Right, a family
member or a friend. I had one time a patient told me, I thought he was my friend. She did invite him back under the assumption they were going to study, and he just took that further. She didn't want to make a big deal of it because they were in class together. That happens sometimes too with coworkers. Something happens, a coworker's giving you a ride, and then something happens, because it may not even look like violent.
Right.
So, but sometimes people just kind of let things happen, because we'll get into that in a minute. But, you know, and then I didn't want that. I didn't want that to happen. And they don't want to make a big deal of it because I have to work with this person, and they don't want to bring their personal life into their job. Or I don't want to tell my friend what happened when he came over here, because we won't even get into if they're dorm mates and the friend liked the person and then the person did that to the other roommate. That can just cause all kinds of...
Yeah, it gets really
These are
complicated.
just examples of what we've seen.
Yeah, in the past. And one thing that we do have, and I don't think we talked about this in the previous episode, but we do offer what's called, the whole state of Georgia offers Jane and John Doe reporting. For military, it's restricted reports, which allows a forensic nurse to collect evidence, submit the exact same kit as they would for anybody else to law enforcement. Law enforcement can hold all of that evidence for a minimum of a year, and it gives that patient time to tell their family, to talk about what's happened, to figure out next steps, to talk to the roommates, to do all the things that makes them feel comfortable without having law enforcement immediately there reporting at the moment.
So when I do a Jane or John Doe or a restricted exam, I don't do anything different other than the name that goes on my kit. Instead of a name going on the kit, we'll give it a case number. I do call law enforcement out to collect that kit, and just ask them for a case number in that area. We have to know where the incident happened so we know which law enforcement to reach out to.
Right.
And understandably so, law enforcement is not a big fan of these cases, because it does make their investigation a little harder when they're coming out maybe 3 weeks later and everything. To me, though, the important part is I'm going to collect that kit right now while I have the evidence. We only have a window of time to collect something. And for some patients, it may be overwhelming, but they understand, and we collect the evidence for what we have now. Everything is time stamped as to when it was collected. I still take the patient's history of the events of what happened, and all of that goes into a chart. Now we'll keep their name here, and then if they decide to put their name to it, then all we do is we call law enforcement up, say, hey, that case number you gave us, this is the name, here's the history, and then they will make contact with that patient. I don't want to say I'm a big fan of Jane Doe or anything like that, but I think it's a good thing because, and I mentioned this last week, what we do is time sensitive as nurses, but what the advocates do, it goes on and on. So if we can get a patient in, meet their needs, which will be, feeling safe, everything like that. If we need to reach out for other resources, like whether that means getting them into our shelter, getting them someplace safe, getting them into counseling, all of those things, all of that will help them better be able to handle what's happened, the trauma that's happened to them.
Help break down some of those barriers they're scared of that initial report.
Correct.
The reason they're in that Jane Doe report to begin with. And I know in the past I've had variety of Jane Does and different reasoning. But one was, she was only a Jane Doe for a couple of days. And she was assaulted by a close friend. And she had to tell her husband. And she did not want her husband finding out through law enforcement, through the grapevine, through whatever avenue that it would have reached him through. So
and we got to keep that husband calm.
Right. And she actually wanted to bring him in. to our center to help educate him on some of the things that have happened and why they may have happened, and help break some of the myths that we're talking about today.
That's very smart.
So it was like 2 days later, she ended up reporting the very next day after talking to her husband. But some of those reasons to who you're assaulted by, and especially if you know them or their family members or close relatives to the family, a lot of people have that fear of not being believed. If it was, your sister's best friend or your sister's husband or, whoever, that might, you might have that fear of not being believed by your family member, by your sister, of what happened to you.
But we also have to remember, too, especially where we live, we're a rural town. Everybody knows everybody,
Information gets around.
Everything, nothing stays quiet. Even, especially these small towns, if, you very well could have an investigator or just law enforcement coming to pick up a kid who, your grandma used to watch them when they got off the bus, that kind of thing. Everybody knows everyone. And this is a very intimate thing that you might not want the whole town to know about. But then also we know how stories go. They change as they move down the line, and things like that. So we really want to protect the anonymity. I said that good too, anonymity. We really want to protect them from that until they're ready, until they, really are strong enough. And unfortunately, sometimes those cases go unchecked without the name getting put back on, and sometimes I'm okay with that too, because they're
okay with that.
They're okay, but they get the advocacy that they need. They get the resources that they need. So it's not always about locking somebody up.
Right. And that's what I always explain to anyone who has been assaulted, and they're going through their options with them about to report, not to report, all the different options that you have that are available to you. One thing that I really go into is you have to do what's best for you. What makes you comfortable? What makes you feel right by you? Because sometimes the criminal justice route is the right thing for them, but sometimes it's not.
Well, the other part to that too is that, and when we get patients in, when you get a client in, you tell them pretty much the same thing I do. I get a patient and I immediately start with, because we're always getting consents signed, like what we can do, what photos can we take, who's going to get who would see those, who's going to see this report. So it all goes back to consent. And I usually lead with, this is your exam. Mm-hmm. At any point, even though you've told me that I can do all of these things, if that's too much, you just say you're done and we're done.
Give them that power back.
Right. So allowing them to be a Jane or John Doe or a restricted case really lets them control. They do have the power.
Take a breath. There's a lot of that. And in the way the process works for everything from start to finish of someone being assaulted, it's like go time in the beginning. You're collecting evidence.
Right. That's because it's time sensitive.
So everything's time sensitive. Law enforcement wants to get as much information as possible, information off the phone, information from the crime scene, bed sheets, whatever they need. So everything happens really fast. And then you have this period of slow where the investigation has to go through its process. You're waiting on evidence to come back, kits to come back. And that's more of a downtime. It's at that point, people are like, hey, where's my kid at?
Yeah,
I haven't heard from anybody. What
hopefully
are you doing?
We've got them in therapy or at
so
least reaching out to their advocate to say.
Right, the advocate really has to fill in some of that space with getting them whatever they need. And then as it gets closer to going to the DA's office into that prosecution, then it speeds up a little bit. Then you're having more meetings. You're talking about it more. And so it's really important for them to understand the full picture of not just right now in this fast-paced moment,
right,
but that there's going to be seasons to what's going on, and for them to understand the whole process, because it is frustrating when you don't understand.
This case might not even make it to court.
Right, it might not.
It might not make it to court, period. But then it may make it, we got a court date, but then there's a continuance. We've got another pause in the way it's going. So it's a wild roller coaster up and down. And I know in our last podcast, I talked about how like the forensic nurse comes in, they do their job, and they pretty much don't see the patient again until they go to court. But that's where it would affect us, because we might get a subpoena and you get told you're going to be subpoenaed to court. So you do what you need to do to take off work, and then the day before, nope, we don't need you. Either they've pled or there's a continuance or something. So I mean, it's a whole big thing. And
Right.
in a perfect world, they get it all done in an hour on TV. So,
Right, you don't see all the pre-work, the pre-setup
Right.
that our victims are also going through. That's been
Correct.
going through, even months before
Well-
you received the subpoena as the nurse.
Right. And then the other part is like, if, they need to restructure everything for safety, on your end, you might have had them in the shelter, then we're trying to rehome them. That very well may be furnishing a whole new apartment for someone.
Right.
And I mean, we don't just, here's your apartment, here's your furniture. We've got to reach out to get some of those resources and help. And it's, there's a lot of hands at play there.
Right.
And so, and that's frustrating for the patient as well. They didn't ask for any of that.
Right. So this process, and I've seen that. I've seen me go through the options that somebody has, and them say, like, they just look at me like completely overwhelmed. This is way too much. And I can usually try to dial it back and go like, here's first steps. Here's your options for first steps. And even then, when I've noticed that it's it's just a lot, then at that point I can say, this process is not for everyone. If this is too much for you, this is too much for you to handle. And some people will say, yes, I just want to forget it ever happened. And that's when we say, like, okay, let's go right into therapy. Let's go right into setting you up with a therapist.
Well, I think, and what makes it so much goes back to the original question or the original myth, is that this is done by a stranger, because the people who are hurt by strangers, they'll
Don't
put their
have this
name on it.
problem.
They're like, let's do this, let's do that, go find them. This is who they look like. This, all of that. And that's what makes the struggle so much harder, is because it is someone that they knew.
Right.
And not only do they have to face what they went through, there's always going to be people are going to pick sides.
Right, and it's never going to go away. It's not going to be,
Right.
This happened in my past, because it's a family member, it's a friend. People will always remember. You'll always be around the
And
same
it's a small
family and
town.
friends. And
You could be
it changes.
going
things.
into Walmart and walk right into them.
So yeah, that is a myth that most sexual assaults are committed by strangers. Myth number 2: if someone did not fight back, it wasn't an assault.
That's a big myth. That's not true.
Because the trauma and science tells a very different story than that.
Right. So there's a response that your body has to a trauma. And we all may have experienced it at one point, maybe not, of course, hopefully not to this degree, but we've all been kind of taken aback where
Right.
we don't know what to say.
Excuse me.
You kind of, you don't know what to say. You kind of pause for a minute, or, that's minor compared to what someone's going through. But, it's what we call a trauma response. And we've just recently in newer training picked up a couple other words, but it used to be fight, flight, or freeze.
It used to be just fight or flight.
Well, you're right. Fight or flight.
Years ago,
right?
it was just, we would take trainings and it was, you're either going to fight or you're going to fly.
Then we
hit
added
somebody or you're running away.
Then we added the freeze, and now they've added the fawn. And so what's happening in some of these when we talk about, and we can go down this rabbit hole of the neurobiology of trauma. And I remember when I was first learning this stuff, and it was the Dr. Campbell. It was one of my first ever trainings, and I was mesmerized by some of the things. And I actually heard a victim speak about what they talked about in the neurobiology of trauma and how the brain works. So the brain is always going to try and protect you.
Right.
And of course, there's all these different areas of your brain that do different jobs. And as we grow, the brain becomes more complex and everything of that sort. But so when a trauma happens, it's almost like your brain is hijacked. And the amygdala is affected first, and that's your fear center, and it just kind of takes over. And it really overrides your prefrontal cortex, which is where you have the rational thinking and everything of that sort. But that amygdala is like, nope, I'm in charge. And it kind of causes the brain to produce different chemicals in our body. So it can kind of overrun us with norepinephrine and cortisol, which is going to just cause the sympathetic nervous system to go on override. And your body is going to be on a constant alert. But with that, you throw in there that freeze, and your body is just like, nope. You're not going anywhere. You're not doing anything. People have told me I didn't yell. Mm-hmm. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I couldn't move. And
I've heard that a lot.
That's called a tonic immobility, where they're kind of aware of what's happening, and they're trying to move.
But their body's just
and their body's like, nope. And it kind of sends it into survival. And, that's just, at the end, they're like, I don't know why I didn't move. And then we go back to that regret that the patient may have of, I didn't do it. And then, somebody will say, well, why didn't you? And you're just like, I don't know.
And we get that a lot. We get that question a lot of like, why didn't you fight back? But honestly, most of the survivors that I've worked with, I don't think I've had very many fight. Very few. I would say most of them fall into freeze, maybe fawn, probably mostly freeze. If I had to pick based on my experience, what I've seen the most.
So we all can figure out what the, what are my words that I'm looking for? The fight, flight, freeze. But the fawn, that's a new one that they've added, where that might be kind of a bargaining thing, like, please don't. Mm-hmm. And not everybody, and I'm not, understand that everybody is different. So I don't want people to think that, well, if you didn't do this, and this, it's...
Then it wasn't, yeah.
Right. So, and we all know what we would do in some of these situations, right? We would fight, we would yell, we would do all these things, right? I mean, I've had some of the toughest people that you can imagine. And there's one lady, I mean, she's like maybe 5 foot, and she is a feisty little thing, and she didn't fight. Mm-hmm.
It's a survival mechanism. It's a way your brain and your body is telling you to survive. And, and a lot of times fighting back is not the best for survival, because the aggressor is only going to top that or take.
Yeah, let's remember that this is all about power and control.
Right.
And sometimes in order to get, and I've had people tell me this too, I didn't fight because I would have died.
Right, exactly.
They would have done way worse. It was just easier to let it happen. With. And, and that's,
I've heard a lot of these.
I understand it. I understand the what it must be like. I don't know that I've ever been in a situation where, because I'm kind of feisty myself and mouth the air, and I at least think I'm going to yell, but I don't know.
You don't know until you get put in that situation.
And hopefully that's never anything.
We talked about this briefly earlier this week. We were talking about one of the trainings that you were having was going through all of these and was talking about maybe adding a new one.
Well, they talked about. Hang on, I had that.
I can't remember what
I did.
it was.
I did
but
print that picture out because we were looking at it and we were like, "Did you see this?"
Yeah, there's another
And
one.
so there was. They did the cry for help.
That's what was it? Yeah, that's
Cry
what it
for
was.
help.
Cry for
Flight.
help.
Please and appease.
But I said the fight or the cry and the appease kind of go together. They were. I mean, it's kind of really taking one category and splitting it off into two based on two different behaviors, but
Yeah,
I see what they were doing.
And then they have the fawn is more of the collapse and submit.
Yeah.
Just like, all right,
Just to give in, just to get it over with, because that's going to cause the least amount of injuries, the least amount of pain, and it's going to be the quickest. But when we were going over that, we talked about like what would our responses be, and like you don't know, and I feel like I've had different responses to different scenarios personally when it comes to fight or flight. So, like you don't know what your body's going to do in those moments.
Yeah, because I think both of us we're pretty feisty in some of those things, but I think we would probably, I don't know.
But we also know that the least resistant causes the least injury, the least. I don't know.
Right. Well, and then also understand that sometimes when a perpetrator is doing this, again, it's about power. And as long as the victim is submissive, they're not going to hurt them.
Right.
And again, it can even be, that's right. You're gonna take this, and then hopefully they'll survive it.
We've been saying she and her a lot. So myth number 3, sexual assault only happens to women.
That's a myth. We do say her because the majority of our patients are women, children. But I have seen men.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. I remember when I was just a baby nurse and I was doing clinicals, and I had a male nurse saying, "Oh, I have to go to this SANE training," and I kind of looked at him, and he's like, "I don't want to go." Well, then he shouldn't go. You got to want to do this, and patients can pick up on that. But I made the comment of I was being sarcastic, but because men don't get assaulted. And he kind of looked at, I was like, "No, this is South Georgia. Men don't get assaulted here." And he kind of looked at me. I said, "Exactly. They just don't talk about it. They just don't report it." And
it's significantly underreported.
And like we were just talking about with that fight, flight, freeze, I think that if a man was overpowered by another man, and that's also going to be one of those things where people are walking away, straightening their jackets and making sure, like, that didn't just happen, did it? And it's terrible because we offer the same services to men as we do women. If it's not safe for that man to live, no, you don't go to our domestic violence shelter, but we will find shelter, a safe shelter. We provide the same therapy sessions and things of that nature. Now, we are trained to do exams on men, but the men that I have done exams on, they might not want to go through all of the steps and processes, and that's fine. We also get prisons. We might do jails, the detention centers, that they can bring the inmate to us, and we will do an exam. Again, and just because they're an inmate, that doesn't mean that we treat them anything other than a patient or a client here. So we do have steps that we have to take if they come in, but we know that assaults happen in prisons.
Right, and there's a huge misconception around men who are assaulted that it automatically labels them as they must have been gay. Something about them.
Yeah, I like that, but...
And I'm like, no. Sexual assault and rape is about power and control. Somebody wanted to gain power and control over this person. It has nothing to do with gender.
Or anything like that. Because... that is the ultimate way to control someone.
Right.
I mean, you can play mind games, you can hit someone, but it is such a vulnerable thing to assault someone in that way.
Right. And that's
And that is huge control over someone.
It's the whole point. It's what that person's gaining. And I've even seen years ago there was a serial rapist, and the gender didn't matter. There was men and women that he would assault, and it was all about gaining power and control over somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it had nothing to do with anybody, even vice versa for women. I've seen struggles with women who are lesbians who are assaulted by a male, and that it really throws off the way people, their assumptions and what they do and how they perceive that investigation.
Right.
And it's just a lot of hurdles. These are all barriers.
And they probably don't want to report either.
Mm-hmm. So, we start going down a rabbit hole.
Again.
Do you see male victims during exams, and what are some of the challenges specifically they face?
Well, yes. Like I said, we do see male victims. They can be from the detention center. They can be from even just our local jails. Or they could just be, someone who was assaulted, again, by someone they know, who is trying to assert power. And the challenges we face are the shame. I mean, it takes a lot to get them here.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I always tell them, thank you for coming. And I want to reassure them that it's a lot.
Yeah, we'll have men contact our crisis line, talk to an advocate about what happened, get options, and then not call back.
Yeah, a lot of times they
through.
call to, and that's the scariest part, because they call outside of the time frame of an exam, and they might want just a little bit of advice or something, but based on what you tell, that they're hurting.
Right.
That they're in a crisis. And so that's when we want to offer them everything that we can. And if we can get them to come in and just talk with a counselor, that's huge.
And it is, I think for women, it's like 1 in 4 women, but for men, it's 1 in 6. And that stands out to me. Let me see if I can find it. There's a guitar company, a guitar string company that, when they send you new strings for your guitar, isn't there 6 strings in a guitar?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah.
One of the 6 strings is blue to represent the 1 in 6 men.
How do I not know about this? Well, you're keeping this from me? Because that is pretty cool. That's pretty neat. I've not heard this.
Let me see if I can pull it up. I think it's just called 1 in 6. I'm going to have to pull it up and drop a link.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do my own little research on that one.
Let me pull up our next question. I will find it. So, myth number 4. If someone wants to report or waits to report, it must not be true. Or if they don't report, it must not be true.
Okay, so this goes back to a lot of what we've already talked about. So that's not true. That's a myth. But that goes back to like what we've already talked about. They're afraid that they're going to get pushed back. You said X, Y, and Z, and so they don't believe them. They're not, going to be believed. They're afraid people aren't going to believe them. They're afraid that people are going to make fun of them, start talking bad about them. It may be somebody that they work with that made it so that they, waited to report or just didn't report. A lot of times it just comes down to, I've had a few patients and they're older and they're like, I'm so ashamed. I put myself in this situation. Why? what do you mean you put yourself in that situation? You were out with friends having a good time, and then something happened to you. Just because you're older doesn't mean that bad things won't happen to you. I mean,
Right.
yeah, older doesn't always necessarily mean wisdom, but we like to tell ourselves that I'm too smart for that.
Mm-hmm.
Because the thing of it is if someone wants to incapacitate somebody, they're going to. And if they want to take control over them, they're going to. So other people may not even realize it was an assault. I didn't yell. We were on a date.
Yeah, it goes back to that. If you didn't fight back,
right?
And your body shutting down and putting you in freeze mode, and then you saying, "I didn't do anything, so I can't report."
Let's go to that one interesting one that they teach us in training, and that's, well, I had an orgasm.
Oh yeah,
And
from either side. I mean, even for
right,
males who are assaulted,
even men.
Yeah.
So, I must have liked it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times we don't control those things. It's
your body doing what it's made to do.
Your body's doing what it's made to do. So if there was something that we, and people don't know this because why would they?
Mm-hmm.
We don't teach it in school. But people just feel that I must have liked it because my body reacted in that way.
And a lot of that stuff prevents people from reporting.
Or if they don't want their family just to know about it either.
Yeah. What is myth number 5? I did find it. It's called the One Blue String
Okay.
Initiative.
I'm going to have to check that out.
I'll put the links to it so people can go.
So I'm really into music and bands and all that kind of stuff. So I can't believe I didn't know all of this stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yep. And you can get your guitar, the strings for it, which one of them will be blue, and money goes back into helping survivors of male assaults.
That's awesome. I know what my musician friends will get for Christmas. You need new strings.
Okay, myth number 5, false reporting is common. I hear this a lot. I'm like, that's not true. She wasn't really assaulted. She's false reporting. They made a false report, and we're going to charge them for false reporting. I hear it so often.
So understand this, and I had to be careful about, just because as the nurse, I'm to be objective. My job is to come in, I get a history, I make sure the patient is medically stable, everything of that sort. I just so happen to be able to collect evidence and everything of that nature.
And my job is very much the exact opposite.
I know. So
my job is very much, it does not matter what you walk in and say, I believe you.
Right.
You're telling the truth to me. And I will tell everyone that you're telling the truth, no matter what.
And I have to be very objective, but for me, this bothers me because, there's statistics out there, and they say that, the rates are low, that it's between 2 and 10% of sexuals, and I think it's even lower than that 10%.
Oh,
that
yeah.
10%'s on the high end.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think in a few podcasts, we're going to do a tour of the exam room.
Yeah, I think our next one.
Okay.
We're planning that for episode 3.
Yeah, and so I will show you some of the tools that we use in these exams. This isn't anything that people want to do for fun, firstly.
Right, or just because.
Right.
Or because they're not sure.
There's nothing that anyone gets out of the exam.
There's no gain.
Exactly.
At all.
It is to false report.
It is 4 hours of awkward, uncomfortable. It's just not that the exam process is awful or uncomfortable. Our nurses are wonderful and they do a great job, but you don't choose to be there. You don't. We have our yearly exams as women, and I don't choose to be there. You just have to do it. You have to go. But yeah, some of the things that are done, the evidence, the way it's collected, nobody's going to sit there and go through that process just to do it.
And bless his heart, I had a road patrol come and pick up a kit one time from me, and he just kind of looked at me as I handed the kit over and we were signing it. And he wasn't a detective or anything like that. I'm going to even assume he was
Newer.
And he said, "So is this legit or what?" And I kind of looked at him and I was like, well, I don't know. What I can tell you is that, I mean, because I don't know.
You have to be objective.
I'm objective. It's
yeah.
not my job. Like, my job is to collect the evidence, to take the patient's history that they told me. You know, if I have a female who says, "Oh, he hit me with this," then I'm going to hopefully photograph some images that maybe have the same pattern. And that's going to be like, consistent with her history.
Right.
Of course, I very well may have a patient with no injury. Again, I can sit there and say, there's reason there could be no injury.
Right.
But it's not for me to say ever,
it's for
this
law
patient's
enforcement
full
to
of stuff.
investigate and for
Right. That's law enforcement. That's for
a jury to decide.
Right.
So, to me, it automatically starts off this long process of investigating a sexual assault on the wrong foot right off the bat when stuff like that happens. So hopefully not everyone has that experience with their law enforcement agencies or just anybody, not even law enforcement, that says this is a fake report or false report. I think there's a lot of information that may be missing. And there's a lot of information that the advocate knows, that the victim may know, that law enforcement doesn't know, or the nurse doesn't know. Information that we can't necessarily always share, but there's more information.
Well, because we can also go back to that neurobiology of trauma, and I don't want to drag this out to be much more longer, but the thing with that is, if, say, a detective's already got a story from an account of events from a patient, and then they get to me and they start to give me a history, and their memory, because of the trauma that they've been through, it's hard for them. Sometimes memories don't even come back in order. We often tell our patients, if you remember anything else down the road, give us a call, and we'll make sure that we add that to your report.
Right.
Because during a trauma, like I said, the prefrontal cortex, which is managing your rational thinking, is overtaken by the amygdala. Well, it also overtakes the hippocampus, which is where memories are stored and work and everything. And so it's kind of like throwing a virus into a computer. It's gonna, when we get flooded with some of those hormones, and hopefully, like, even, and I don't know the statistic, but even in like officer involved shootings, before they really sit down with them, they like them to have 1 or 2 sleep cycles, like a night of sleep, because while it's still going to be a big thing, there's still a lot of stress happening. We can help relieve some of that stress, hopefully by a decent night's sleep. You can start to think a little bit better after you've rested a minute. Also, after you're safe. So when they come in, and so a lot of times, back to the false reporting, if somebody says, well, that's not the story I got,
or that's not the story you told the night of,
right,
it's not going to be the same.
It very well may not be.
I'd like to explain it to people as everything that you do in, every single thing that you do, from the time that you brush your teeth to your time to go to bed, you just jot it down in a sticky note, step by step, you stick it to the wall. Different walls in your house. You go to work, you get in a car accident, you come home, and now you need to re-put your day back in order from those sticky notes. While you have that adrenaline running, while you just got into a major accident, and you need to try to use your memory to recreate the day. It's extremely hard, taking out that you had an assault committed against you, that you've got law enforcement putting pressure on you to make sure you get that story right. Because if it's wrong, you're not being honest.
Well, and then the other part is, let's go ahead and add that to somebody, that it's someone you knew.
Right.
So we'll just add that extra pressure to you. So we, as nurses, we kind of are taught to understand how those things go, and that's why it's important to have offer follow-up.
Yep.
About some of that, and
to understand that the story may be out of order, or it may be missing things, because that's our brain's protective mechanism is to cover up some of the most traumatic things you've experienced. So it may be missing things. It may be out of order. They may need to go back and add to it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it was fault.
Some of that, and it depends also on what happened during the assault.
And if alcohol was involved.
Was alcohol involved? Was it just a sexual assault? Was there some violence involved, from physical violence, such as a strangulation? Mm-hmm. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But we put those things into there too. And, that I don't know how they are even able to recall what they tell me.
It's just some things to consider. I've also seen different scenarios play out as a false report that may not have necessarily been a false report had the bigger picture been looked at.
Well, the thing with false reporting is it is low, and there are people who are charged with false reporting.
And there are people who 100% do false report.
Correct.
It's
and
just
it does make it difficult because we let that small amount overshadow.
It becomes everybody.
Right. And okay, first of all, these stories are never gonna these stories are it's never the same. It's always going to be something crazy. And there's people I often have a lot of whys, but it's not for me to say, why did you do that? Because it's their why. I can ask why, but they're going to tell me, I don't know. So I don't ask why. But the people who, and it's hard because the people who have false reported, we also know that people who fall victim to sexual assault have a higher incidence of it happening again.
Right.
And I've straight had a victim tell me who was assaulted, and it had alcohol involved, and she was actually charged with false reporting. And I spoke to her later, and I said, well, just understand that we're here for you if you ever need us again. And she said, no. So because of the false reporting and nobody believing her, if that does happen to her again, the chances of her even reaching out to anyone are going to be slim and none. And so then that person gets to sit there with that for however long, if that were to happen again. So it changes people, and we're taught to believe. And as a nurse, I'm coming in again, working in the ER, people would come in with crazy stories all the time. They tell the nurse one thing, the doctor comes in and they say something completely different. We're like, that is not what you said. Okay.
I mean, I've seen that happen too. And I've also seen the reverse of that where, we had someone say something completely off the wall. They were assaulted by aliens, probed in the whole thing, like straight off of a TV show. And I was like, here we go. I believe you. We're doing this. Even though nobody else did, I was like, we're doing it. And it was true. I mean, not the aliens. I mean, it was not the aliens. That was part of their
I'm thinking there might have been some mental health involved there, which
that was part of their mental health diagnosis, but someone had assaulted them. And that was their only way of communicating it. And sure enough,
yeah,
it went all the way through.
Well, that's fortunate that somebody didn't say, no, we're not investigating. But and
label it as a false report,
right? So that's great. Crazy. I mean, we know it happens, but that's awesome. That
one will stick with me forever, and it really has shaped the way I provide advocacy and the way I train other people to provide advocacy because of an experience like that. To say you always believe. It does not matter. It is not your job to do investigations. It's not your job to collect the evidence. It's your job to believe them regardless of what they say.
Right. And it's another one of those things that I always kind of turn around and I'm like, did I do everything I was supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I'm not a box checker. I mean, we have lists that, yes, we go down. I'm more of a free texter. I like to add my own to it. But did we do everything? Did we hit all of the highlights that we're supposed to hit to make sure that we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's for our people?
Right. So there's nothing else that there is no what ifs left.
Right.
Should have, you could.
And it's always the minute you dismiss something, that's the one that's going to bite you in the butt.
Oh yeah.
Because you'll be like, nah, they were crazy.
I want to skip some of our questions that we wanted to talk about just because, as usual, we have gone over time. But it's important. A lot of the things we've talked about, it goes back to that importance of trauma-informed care
Right.
on both of our parts, on each player in the field. Plug in the person, law enforcement, district attorney, nurse, advocate. It's really important to all have that trauma-informed care. It goes a really long way to understand the person that you're working with, the trauma that they have gone through, what that trauma looks like, could potentially look like, what are some of the signs and symptoms to say, hey, these are all normal.
Right.
It might not look normal for anybody else, but for this scenario it is. What does trauma-informed care look like from your standpoint?
Well, and I touched a little bit on that too when I talk about from the beginning, and that patient walks into in to see me. I try to be warm and inviting. I try to be very open, and you can tell me whatever you want to tell me. I let them know that they're in control as we're doing consents. I personally like to read every line that they're going to sign so that they're aware of what they're going to sign.
Yeah.
But then I also say, just because you're saying yes now doesn't mean that you can't stop. If we get anywhere in this exam and you feel uncomfortable, that's from the get-go. Then we get into the exam, and I read my room, but I do try to make it a little bit of a lighter atmosphere. It is very serious, but I try to make them feel safe and comfortable. And just, again, let them know. And I don't rush anything. I do take a long time, but I don't rush anything. It's at their pace. Unless they want it to be rushed, but there's certain things that I need to go take my time with. But if they don't want something during the exam, then I don't do it.
Right.
I might explain, it's important I do collect this, but this is your exam. This is completely up to you.
And the trauma-informed care is knowing that they need the options to have choices.
Right. And I like to make sure that they know what their options are. And then on top of that, I like to let them know they're in control of all of this. I've had patients before when, I might be trying to maybe swab an area. That patient might have their hand on top of my hand that they have control. We've had patients swab themselves before. Because, and
that's what they wanted to do.
That's what they wanted to do.
That's what made them feel comfortable.
We're in a controlled environment, and we're all already here. So, and the only other person whose DNA I'm going to get in this particular area is hers or his. So you can put your hand on my hand. And it gives them a big sense of being in control.
Sexual assault is one of the most misunderstood crimes. The confusing for people to understand, to digest, to relate to when it comes to working with that family member that's been assaulted or that coworker or friend. And those myths and misconceptions we've talked about have shaped how victims are treated. How they're treated by even other advocacy centers, other, law enforcement, investigators. It determines how safe they feel coming forward with reporting and the options that they have to report. But we are here to talk about those myths and replace them with positives.
Right.
Because we've had a lot of positives, and we have really great team members that we work with, and we have great law enforcement that we work with that are all trauma-informed. And it's really nice to have trauma-informed teams in our area that are well-trained and work with victims very well. But thank you for being here.
Thanks
I
for
can't
having me.
wait to do the next episode. We're going to go through an entire, we might set up the whole room in an exam room. That sounds great to me. So we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye.